Temps staying in the upper 40s. Gets warmer, though, for the rest of the week. I'm KIRO 7, Pinpoint meteorologist Nick Allard.
We have clouds, 44 degrees in downtown Seattle. I'm Lisa Brooks.
Listen on your smart speakers, Amazon, Google Home, and Apple HomePod. KIRO Radio 97.3 FM with Tom and Curly now on your drive home.
From the Carter Subaru Studios, this is the Gee and Ursula Show with G. Scott and Ursula Royteen.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into the 10 o'clock hour of the Gee and Ursula Show. Mike Lewis is in today, filling in for Ursula as she is out there on a celebrity cruise.
Yeah, I mean, she's tweeted out a couple of things from that cruise. It sounds lovely. It's Bahamas, right?
I think so.
Something like that?
It's away.
It's a ways away.
It's away.
It's a warmer ways away. It's a warmer ways away.
In this 10 o'clock hour, there is a lot going on. Coming up in this hour, Rachel Bell will let you know the plan to simplify your life, your entire lives. All we need is a little help from President Trump. In scenarios, what should you do when your partner wants to get matching tattoos with their best friend of the opposite sex? Yes, we do that at 10:45. But now let's get to it. Paul Danforth and Michelle Beatty's resignations from Kennedy Catholic High School in Burien has garnered international media attention. There have been hundreds of students, parents, and alumni that have shown their support for these two teachers, many thinking that they were forced to step down as a result of their sexual orientations. In studio with us right now is a parent that has a 15-year-old at Kennedy and was also part of the peaceful protest last Tuesday. Emily Lynn Paulson joins us. Thank you so much for joining us, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get to it. How did you find out about the teachers, the two teachers resigning?
Got an email saying that these two teachers had voluntarily resigned, and I didn't think much of it. I sent a screenshot to my son, and I said, do you have these teachers? Do you know anything about this? And his response was, yeah, I heard they were fired because they're gay. At that point, then I started texting friends and calling friends, and before I knew it, there was a Facebook group started, parents who support these two teachers, and, grew to 6,000 members. And then we started to get some answers, a letter from the Archdiocese.
When you first found out, and you found out that they were either forced to resign or voluntarily resign because of their sexual orientation, what were you thinking at that moment?
Well, at first I just saw voluntarily resigned. The school didn't comment on their sexual orientation at all in the initial email. And so when my son said that, it was shocking. First of all, I didn't know these two teachers' personal lives. And so for him to know all of that information was shocking. And then to find out, isn't it illegal to be fired for being gay in Washington? And how did this happen? And just kind of putting the pieces together.
So prior to the announcement and then you finding out what appears to have happened, although the school is still maintaining voluntarily resigned, was it known in the student body that both these teachers were gay?
I think from what I have heard, they knew from social media, but it also wasn't an issue. It's not an issue for the students. Right.
Well, that's my point. And so, have you been satisfied with what you've heard from administrators there?
No.
That's simple.
I can.
Well, you know what? I want to go on that question. You have not been satisfied. Tell us why.
I think the initial silence was damning. The initial silence from the administration and the fact that when we heard from the Archbishop, we weren't super happy with what he had to say. And again, when the school maintains that they voluntarily resigned, but what we're hearing from one of the teacher's fiance is that this is not the case, and so there's all the pieces aren't matching up. It's not all fitting together, and so we haven't been, at least I haven't been satisfied with what I've heard from the school.
Emily, you wrote a column in the Seattle Times. It was titled "Why I Stand in Solidarity with My Perfectly Imperfect Catholic Community." Great piece, by the way. Read the whole thing. In it, you said, up until that point, the rewards of our Catholic community have outweighed the things I disagree with. What are some of those rewards right now of the Catholic community? What are some of those rewards?
I think the protest in itself shows those rewards. I mean, the people who we have made a community with, the people who we have become friends with, the people our son has become friends with over the years, and the way we've felt in this community has outweighed any of the beliefs of the Catholic Church we don't agree with, because none of them have negatively affected us to this point. And now we're seeing that teachers who our students love are being forced to resign because of their sexuality. And so now we're being confronted with, gosh, this really is going behind the scenes. We don't want to acknowledge that these beliefs are, I guess, catching up to us. We wanted to brush these under the rug, and now it's really kind of in our face.
Well, so and I think if I understand correctly, the point of your piece was you can kind of make a decision by departing from an organization or staying within it, and maybe trying to make change from within. And I think that's what a lot of American Catholics struggle with. I think there are many people who feel like the church should have maybe a little more modern attitudes in certain areas, and I think that there's been a little bit of a push toward liberalization in the Catholic Church. I went to the Catholic school for 12 years, and it's weirdly enough, it seemed fairly liberal then, and then it got much, much more conservative over time. I know Gonzaga struggles with this as well. How do you then, in a 2,000-year-old institution, how do you make change from within? I mean, what is the point about staying within it and not making your protest felt by departing, but making your protest felt from within?
Right. I think that's the place we're at right now is what's going to make a change? Is it our dollars? Is it really enough to say, okay, well, I'm not paying this tuition anymore. I'm going to go to public school. Does that actually help? What if all the parents did that? Are we able to even make a change? And so I think for me, I'm at this point where I don't think the answer is simply just, let's get out of here and let's not participate in this anymore. I think with social media now, and the kids are realizing people are listening to us. I mean, again, this has been international news, and at some point, we need to be heard by the right people, and why can't the catechism change?
So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, it's been sort of mostly characterized as a group of parents and students, a large group of parents and students and other people who care, pitted against an administration and maybe the archdiocese regarding this decision. But what about parents and parents? I mean, there must be, even within Kennedy Catholic, support for the fact that these two teachers should have resigned, given the fact that they were stepping outside what is standard Catholic catechism.
They may be there, but they're not speaking loudly. I haven't.
So you haven't heard any from any of them.
Let me ask you this. By the way, that is the voice of Emily Lynn Paulson. She is a parent of a 15-year-old student that is attending Kennedy Catholic High School out there in Burien. Let me ask you this. So there has been, they were forced to resign or they voluntarily resigned, and we all know that it's centered around same-sex marriage. And the conversation has been, well, this is not accepted by the church. And my question to you is neither is divorce or premarital sex. So help us understand with some of the birth control. Help us understand with some of the parents who probably have been divorced, probably have had premarital. What are some of the conversations centered around that hypocrisy?
I think that is one of the big problems. One of the many problems is that these rules, these thousands of years old, this doctrine, this catechism, these rules that we have around all of these things that are not okay, they're not being applied equally. And so you do have parents who have been divorced and not, it hasn't been properly annulled and they've been remarried. Obviously, not every teacher and every staff member at every Catholic school has 8 or 9 children. So clearly there's some birth control going on. Why haven't they been asked to voluntarily resign? Is it really as simple as an issue versus an issue if all of these things are considered not okay in the Catholic Church? So I think that's part of the hypocrisy, right? Is why is one thing okay and not another, and yet it's all within the Catholic Church, within the catechism, that nobody should be participating in these things.
What would you like to see the schools do, considering that the archdiocese, it seems like they're not going to change their policies or their decisions. What would you like to see Kennedy Catholic do?
I would love to see Kennedy, get out from underneath the archdiocese, whether it's have their own board of directors. And I don't have all the answers. I don't know what that looks like, but I do think that there are a lot of parents who would be willing to put their dollars to work And I don't know how it looks because Kennedy is on archdiocesan property. And so what does that look like? Is that even allowed? How much control does the archdiocese have? So I think there's a lot of questions. And again, when you went back to, are you satisfied with the answer from the school? No, because I don't know how, are their hands really tied? I don't know how much they are controlled by the archdiocese.
What would you say if the school said, all right, we're going to come up with a policy. We're not going to rehire these two people who voluntarily resigned, as we're told. We're going to come up with a policy that is sort of, along the lines of the Clinton administration tried to split the difference in the military with the don't ask, don't tell. You can be like this. We just don't want you to post it on social media. We don't want you to make us step outside what the church would like us to represent. I mean, would you find that a fair compromise, or do you think that the church and the school need to make wholesale changes on their openness about these issues?
I think they have had the don't ask, don't tell policy because obviously these teachers have been there. And so at what point, I think they just need to recognize honesty as a human right, and that how much of their job is dictated by their sexuality. Does it matter as a teacher if they're engaged to a man or a woman or whatever, or if they've been married before, if they're on birth control? At what point is it personal privacy and allowing to live your life the way you want to? And we are in this age of social media. So where do you draw the line?
Well, but this is sort of the thing that you actually don't do in your column is draw that line. Mm-hmm. So where do you draw that line when you find that this is different from what it sounds like what you're saying, your beliefs are definitely outside of what the church doctrine is. Mm-hmm. Where do you draw yours?
Right, and I think that's what I'm being confronted with now, and why I wrote the column is, up until this point, no, we haven't seen anybody being negatively affected by it that I know of, and now we are. And so, what do we do with that information? Again, is it as simple as just leaving the school? Is it as simple as putting our dollars to work in a different way? I'm not sure, but I know that this is not what I want to teach my son. I want to teach my son that you rally around people who are discriminated against.
Right.
I don't want to teach him that. I don't want him to think that if he is different, he is going to be excluded or his job's going to be at stake.
What is the conversation, if you don't mind sharing, that you are having with your 15-year-old son that is at Kennedy right now? You're having this conversation. He's still attending the school. You're still paying for him to go to school. Mm-hmm. And Mike just asked you a tough question, and I think it's a question that everybody's being faced with. But how do you take this conversation and have it with your son right now?
It's actually been really easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he thinks an injustice was done, and he wants to speak about it. He wants to talk about it. He wants to be heard. And he doesn't think it's right. He doesn't understand. I think that's the biggest thing is these kids, when you see them, they're like, what's the big deal? They don't understand why the church cares, who you're married to, who you're not married to, man, woman. And so for me, it's been an easy conversation. And it's also highlights the fact that it's really easy to have two completely opposite viewpoints at the same time. He can still love a place and the people, love the school, love the students, love the teachers, and really hate what it's based on and those old beliefs.
And I know that this is a pretty speculative question, but let's just focus on your son. Do you anticipate when he's all right? So he's not far from moving out of the house, maybe going to college or whatever it is. I don't know whatever his future is. Do you think he stays involved in the church?
I don't think so. And I think we're kind of seeing that now. A lot of young people are leaving the church because of things like this, because it isn't changing where it needs to change and evolving the way it needs to evolve. And I think young people are questioning the status quo, and whether that's the catechism, whether it's politics, whatever it is, I think that's the generation that we're seeing that happen. And I don't see him, staying that course.
A little bit about you, Emily. I found out that you're the author of a recent memoir that chronicles your struggle with sobriety and parenting, all of which has played into your unique take on this whole Kennedy situation. And I found out that AA is where you kind of brought you to religion, became a Catholic. Tell us about that.
So I actually married into Catholicism.
Okay.
And, one of the things I really credit my parents with growing up is we weren't parishioners of we didn't have a certain denomination. We had a belief in God, and my parents let me kind of explore the way I wanted to. I was in music, I sang, I played the flute at different churches, and so I really felt like I was very educated in different religions, and I loved Catholicism. I loved our cathedral. I loved the architecture. I loved the pomp and circumstance of the Mass.
The ritual.
Yeah, the rituals of it. I really did. And I loved where Mary was placed. I loved how there's such a significance placed on Mary. And so I knew a lot going into Catholicism. When I met my husband, he came from a long line of Catholics. And so when we got married, I became Catholic. And so I went through the process as an adult. But I would say I didn't really find a connection with God until I went through AA. And so for me, I went to a very dark place and and felt accepted, as someone, again, in the margins, right? Someone who was an addict. And so in this, where I am now, like, that's not the God I know. That's not the Jesus I know, is someone who would judge somebody based on what they love. And so I think it has played a big part in how I view this whole situation, for sure.
No, I was just going to say, is your whole family, do they feel the same way about this, or is there any disagreement between, say, you and your husband, who comes from a more traditional Catholic background?
I think it's a much harder question to answer for him, and I think that's why I'm here, because I'm used to being, I'm okay being the voice of dissonance, and I do think that the people who need a voice and can't have one, teachers who are being asked by the Archdiocese not to speak, I think I owe it to my son and the other students and the teachers to be out there, and I'm fine taking the heat.
I think, Emily, well, first of all, thank you so much for coming down here. I mean, I think it takes a lot of courage to come on here and speak and talk about this topic on the radio, because it's a topic that's so complex and a bunch of things going on. But listening to you, and I've met some friends that are Catholic as well, and they're upset about this. And so there is a lot of you and people that are Catholic that disagree with this. And so I guess Mike kind of asked this question, but I need to ask it again. At what point does the participation become complicit in these decisions that continue?
Absolutely, and I think we've been complicit the whole time. It's just now we're seeing that, oh yeah, this really does happen in our very liberal Seattle bubble, where we do see rainbow flags on some churches, and we just kind of think everything's okay. And I think we're realizing that we're being complicit if we don't speak up and we don't do something about it.
That's Emily Lynn Paulson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Thanks, Emily.
That book, what's the name of that book?
Highlight Reel, Finding Honesty and Recovery Beyond the Filtered Life.
Can I get it on Amazon?
I've got a copy for you right here.
Oh, there we go.
Signed copy.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily. Really appreciate it. 10:45, we'll have scenarios, and the question is going to be, would you be okay with your significant other getting a matching tattoo of her best friend that is the opposite sex? Yes, we talk about that. But in next, Rachel Bell. She'll join us, and she's going to talk about letting you know the plan that will simplify your entire life. It's the Gee and Ursula Show.